So today we learned two more LSU Tigers have declared for the draft. K'Lavon Chaisson has declared. He announced via social media. I guess is sort of what all of them have done. And also good on LSU, because my assumption here is that LSU has done the edits. So they've all, whether they've been staying or going, they've all had an edit done. And if you're on social media, you know what it is. It's a picture and the graphics, and it's all really well done, which is the statement that they've written. So Chaisson announced first that he was going. And the interesting thing is there had been a lot of kind of like nondescript chatter that would suggest he was thinking about coming back. I mean, even yesterday there was a social media post where they were discussing who wears 18 next year. And I think it was Brody Miller who had replied and mentioned someone that could be a candidate to wear 18. And I'm almost positive it was Braden Fajoko who replied to Brody and was like, how can someone have 18 if 18's wearing 18 next year? Meaning Chaisson coming back. Well, there was just a lot of that sort of nondescript feeling that maybe he was considering a return. But nonetheless, Chaisson announced today that he is foregoing his senior year and going pro. And then just a short time before we came on the air, Thaddeus Moss followed suit and announced T2 would also go pro, making his announcement via social media as well. So Chaisson and Moss both today announcing that they'll forego their remaining eligibility. So that means now 9 Tigers have declared their intention to leave early for the draft. And that would be the second most in program history. Of course, following the 2012 season, LSU had 11 players leave early. And if you include Tyrann Mathieu, it's actually 12. So 9 this year would be the second most. And in some respects, a lot of people have asked, if LSU had lost on Monday, would all of these guys have gone pro? And my assumption is that the answer would be yes. And this is why. And it's somewhat of an oddity because this season went into middle January, most of the decisions that guys make regarding the draft are made when the season ends. So most players in college football are not playing in that first week in December in a conference championship game. So a lot of players at that point make their announcement if they're going pro or not, and many of them now make the announcement if they're going to play in the bowl game or not. They'll make their announcement and say whether or not they're going to play in the bowl game. Some will play their bowl game and then make the announcement. But a lot of these bowl games are played in middle or late December now. And LSU played until January the 13th. And then the day to announce is the 17th. So you had this very small window. My guess, and so my point in all that is, while all of these guys will say they hadn't considered it, all of them had. They had to, because you can't start that conversation and allow yourself just 3 full days to decide. So they've all known at this point. I guess that's my point, is regardless of what had happened on Monday, these guys had to have already made their decision. So Chaisson leaving isn't a big surprise, and I think it's the right move. Moss, I think, would have certainly, both Chaisson and Moss, I think, would have stood to gain from putting more on film. But the reality is twofold. Number one, with K'Lavon Chaisson, he plays at a premium position. He's already suffered a major injury once, and he had a phenomenal season. 60 tackles this year, 13.5 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks, and a forced fumble. He did plenty this year, and on the biggest stages, he played best. He was the defensive MVP of the Peach Bowl. His best game of the season came against Alabama, where he had 10 tackles and was 3.5 tackles for loss and a sack in that ball game. So there's plenty on film there, and Chaisson's the kind of guy that's going to go to the combine and test exceptionally well. They're going to look at 6'4", 250, chiseled. He'll run very well. He'll test very well. And when you think about how the NFL values edge rushers, I mean, consider last year there were 7 edge rushers taken in the first round. That's almost 1 out of every 4 selections in round 1 were a pass rusher. And you look at guys like Montez Sweat. Montez Sweat was a very good player at Mississippi State. He goes to the combine, he runs a 4.4 140, and he explodes, and he moves into round 1 where he's taken 26 overall by Washington. That could be Chaisson this year. I mean, I can think of guys like Ziggy Ansah, who went to BYU, who played like 2 years of organized football, but everyone looked at him and went, look at this guy. I mean, he's central casting for an edge rusher. And so he went top 10 to Detroit. Chaisson, I think, has that possibility. I don't know about top 10, but I think he has a possibility of getting around 1. Moss is a guy where didn't play much his first year at NC State, sat out his second year when he transferred to LSU. His third year in school, he was injured and didn't get on the field. And then this year, he was finally healthy in an offense that valued the tight end, and he caught 47 balls for 570 yards and 4 touchdowns. He caught 2 touchdowns in the championship game. Had some you got mossed moments. Of course, the brilliant catch against Alabama, tiptoeing on the sideline. So you saw moments where he has great hands, and probably the reason he would elevate himself even more as an NFL prospect is not only the fact that he caught the ball exceptionally well, but he did phenomenal work as a blocker, very physical blocker at the line of scrimmage. And it's rare in today's NFL that you have one guy that can do both, that can both catch the ball and block. It's why a guy like George Kittle is so valuable, or a guy like Kelsey is so valuable, or when Gronk, obviously, who's the poster child for this, was so valuable, because it's more so you look at the NFL today and you've got guys like that aren't necessarily the hybrid. They're an either or. Jared Cook is basically a pass-catching tight end. Jimmy Graham's a pass-catching tight end. It's rare that you find someone who is proficient at both. And Moss this year showed he could be proficient at both. For what it's worth, we had Mike D on with us yesterday, and he was asked, this is before we knew these announcements, but his draft grades on both Chaisson and Moss.
I think Chaisson would somehow sneak into round 1. He's interesting that he has sort of indicated in many different circles that he's going to return. He hasn't officially done it, but he's come about as close as you can get to it. I thought he would come out, because I think he will still end up in somewhere in round 1 in the latter part of it. With Moss, he's a 1-year guy coming off of an injury of a year ago, probably in the middle of the draft, but man, he put up some big numbers.
So middle round pick for Moss, maybe sneaking into round 1 for Chaisson is about right. But also the thing to consider with Moss is, does it really benefit him to come back and try to move up into round 1 when you come from a family that has means?